Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NRG series in Lansing, Michigan this weekend. I'm your host, Mr. Clark, joined by my co-host, Corbin Hostler. And Corbin, today we're going to be covering 7 rounds of Magic Standard into the top 8, and we're going to see some exciting action happening here this weekend. Are you excited for some Standard?
Hey, I can't wait because look, we know we're going to see a lot of Vivi Cauldron. That's part of Standard, but there's some other stuff going on too, and we got some of that hopefully lined up today. So I am looking forward to seeing what players are innovating on, or even if it's just iterating on when it comes to to see what we got on tap today.
Definitely, yeah. We saw the Arena Championships happen, and there was a ton of Is It Cauldron. The Spotlight is next week, and I'm sure a lot of players are looking to that. So I'm really curious to see what are some of the big players going to do here, and are they going to, go in line with Is It Cauldron? They have innovations, they're testing for Orlando, or are we going to see something, even wilder happen? Who knows? But let's check out what these players are playing for this weekend, as there is a lot on the line. This is a 10K showdown today. So first place, looking at $2,400, 30 points, and an NRG invitational invite, along with a regional championship invite. If you're new to the NRG series, showdowns basically are our way of saying if you win this tournament, you make it to our end of the year event, which we're going to show you who is in the running for that right now, as those points also all go towards a yearly leaderboard. If you see a name in orange, that's because that name has already qualified. So you see names like Grayson Nimitz, Rodney Bedell, Cliff Boyardee, Theo Jung, Derek Davis, all those players and more. Andrew Ellen Bogan, Pro Tour champion. They are going to be playing at our end of the year event. And we're going to look at our players to watch really quick before we head on down to our feature match areas. We have a couple in particular we're looking at here. Grayson Nimitz is the only player on the leaderboard who has already qualified. Everyone else here is in the running, Corbin, to make our end of the year championship. Grayson's our number one. We didn't want to leave him off the board here. And you're going to notice Roger Suleiman a couple names down. If you've been watching for the last couple of years, Roger has made all of our championship events, has even won one of them. And this is his hometown event, Corbin. So we have him in our feature match area for round 1 to see if he can defend the title and make his way back to champs.
You cannot ask for a better way to start off the weekend of Magic. Hometown hero playing a hero type deck, you might say, because it's not blue and red. So we're going to have that to look forward to. But yeah, look, it's all about making that end of the year championship. If you are someone who hits all these NRG events up regularly, and trust me, they go all the way for that event, right? It is not just go play a tournament for a lot of money. It is truly an experience, one of a kind that can make really everything pay off, right? Just makes it feel really good if you are a competitive Magic player, valued in a way that not every tournament can these days, right? So it's a really special experience that is not all that far away now, right? Like a couple months, a couple events between here and there, and we'll qualify some players this weekend for that tournament.
Yeah, we're in the back half. We're on season 2 of our year. Season 1, if you're watching these events, that basically means we cut off. That's why you see so many names in orange. Our top 4 players who hadn't already been qualified go over. And then at the end of the season, which is going to be this weekend's event plus 3 more weekends, we will get the next top 4 players who are not qualified. And that's why you're going to be seeing so many of those players who are very close in the running there, like the Zoe Riedermans. They're going to come out and they're going to play in all these events because they want to lock up that thing. We haven't even talked about it yet, but our championship at the end of the year does give a Pro Tour invite as well. So all of these events are kind of like, a little mini RC that leads you to the PTQ that is NRG champs. And so there's going to be a lot on the line. It's really fierce competition. I mean, you go back to our leaderboard really quick there. We have Pro Tour champions in the running for that. Last year at our event, we had players like Dominic Harvey, who is in attendance today. That's someone who's top 8 at the Pro Tour as well. That's very good. Theo Jung plays tons of Pro Tour. Incredibly strong player. All these players are accomplished and are very good at playing Magic. I believe Cliff's played a PT as well now. I believe Final Fantasy was his first one. So, yeah, and Derek Davis top 8 at Pro Tour as well back at when they all came back at PT1. So, yeah, I mean, come on. This is just a stacked field of Magic players.
Yeah, hard to ask for a better field than this, but that's what, years of the NRG series have showed us, that you can take players who grind these regional events and they become really good at Magic. And you see names here that you're going to see at the Pro Tour in 2 years. That tends to be how a lot of these events can work. And a lot of these players have, sort of come up over the years on the regional circuit. And these days, you see the NRG alums out at the Pro Tour or at the RC. Everyone's got those incredible jackets that
Hmm.
you get from the champs. That's I have to say, like it's you can spot it across the room, and they look very good.
Yes. Yeah, and in that same vein, right, Connor Mullally, our player of the year back in 2023, he's trained a couple of pro tours now, doing very well at some RCs and then the PT itself. So, you do see a lot of, like you were kind of saying, burgeoning talent come up on the NRG series here. And then, they start doing really well at these bigger events, and it's no, lack. It's no surprise, excuse me, they have so much experience and not there a lack of with so much of paper magic these days, Corbin. There's not as much actual big paper tournaments, right? Like 10 years ago, we had them all over the place all the time.
Right.
But here at the series, we're kind of, the last mainstay. And speaking of the last mainstay, I think our players are ready.
It's Just Guy Control playing Inevitable with Defeat.
I have seen that. You're right. It's a cool card.
Right about it. Not just the first war, and then go back and revisit later, which and got free Japan short later. So yeah, it's really cool. And physics stories come out, and look, you got some stories here. Raja not playing he's on Azorius and Chris Smith. Wouldn't this be a story of Storm Splitter combo?
I get an honor token.
Yes. Spice here in the morning, and
Yeah, Chris Smith, someone who played a lot of our events last year, and was doing very well. And this year is kind of prioritizing the other stuff in life, hasn't coming out. But when you have the hometown energy, you're going to come out.
sleep in your own bed for an event, basically.
Speaking of hard to beat, Roger Sullivan on control is always someone who's hard to beat. He loves these sort of blue do-nothing decks or unplayable black something mid-range. That is the Roger Sullivan special.
Well, I mentioned it at the top. We have what's called planetary spotlight. The point is,
Judge.
Do you test out the room?
Yeah, whenever it enters, that is a trigger. The draw card is a trigger.
Yeah, but the warp is what I meant. Is it like a vote?
Hi, friends. How can I help?
I just want to know how warp works. Like, is it? It's an alternate casting cost, and then is it similar to?
I imagine if you're very confident in your spice, you hold it, and if you're maybe a little lacking, then I need to.
Yeah. My opponent
Also, it
casts a
depends
spell
on if
for
I
warp
have
cost.
friends who are also
Like,
playing the deck. Like,
I just
hey,
want to
do
know
you mind
how the
if I,
mechanic
when
works.
this event with our deck,
I haven't played it.
Disco play, whatever deck it is. As there is some warp cost a little bit odder, but
It sets a delay trigger at the end of turn, exile this card, and then cast it later from your side.
Okay. Yeah.
Nice and look starting their turn. Roger, big probably
1720? It's done. It's done.
My turn.
Yeah, Valley Flood Color flashed in after Consultant Star Charge. Valley Flood Color card about a year ago, we actually saw their champs a couple of bring, as this was part of like a combo mid-range deck, and Chris has, sort of updated it post B&R, post rotation, and is playing back here today. Speaking of updated, this is where his control deck got a huge amount of card recently. Roger played 2 of now with Consultant Star Chart, so it's on your screen a second ago. Kind of the Memory Deluge variant of choice, but we saw Roger actually kept the 2-lander. And thanks to Consult being able to be played for 2 for sort of a less valuable mode, was able to find his land drops. Something that you just don't normally see from those 4-mana restock cards in the late game. Kind of a huge get for decks that do stuff like this.
Put 2 stuff down.
good in the format where you have your
Yes, sir, I'm going to double through
the first ideal first goal. And got the stack. So this is an interesting one. About is on the screen. So what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, the TikTok version of this would just be otter spells burn, right? But to get a little deeper about it, basically Storm Splitter has the storm, essentially you're going to make copies of it every single time you cast a spell. This one works while in play instead of in cast. And then Valley Flood Caller, grows all our creatures, and Enduring Vitality keeps half creatures for mana. So the idea basically being every time you cast a spell, you're going to go up a mana and exponentially grows. So eventually Chris will make enough otters that we can attack the lethal on that turn and cast after casting a couple spells, And if you have Valley Flood Caller in play, we're getting, a lot of power bonuses as well. So you don't even need that many cards. It really just sort of depends on how much, chip damage you've done to your opponent and sort of, what their board situation is like. Someone like Roger, we're not going to probably see a ton of creatures for most of the game until we really start closing things around. So this is going to be a deck where things are going to kind of be very slow and steady for Chris, and then eventually the hope is, Roger will slip up or not have the answer at the right point, and then we're going to go absolutely berserk.
Well, second talent is at the field here. Just Roger's 5 mana opens, just played the game. Not had a lot of chess clock used up over there as Roger.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you actually see a lot of, right, Corbin? I mean, you've been doing Magic coverage for years. Yeah. The control deck, if you were to look at just their turns, they use the smallest amount of the clock. Now, sometimes they need to use a lot to think as well, but a lot of times really what happens is the opponent has to play around a bunch of things, and that's where kind of, the time ends up happening. This is also why the control players are like, it's not my fault. I went to time. I spent 10 minutes this round. Right. The opponent had to think about all the stuff, and they had to respond, etc. Speaking of thinking about stuff here, looks like Roger decided not to play Elspeth.
Yeah, could have opted to make the tokens there. Try to set up the board. Just it seems doesn't want to go low on mana. So just Chris digging through the deck here. Now, yeah, it does seem like perhaps Raja just never wants to be caught shields down in the matchup, knowing that I suppose we don't actually know what he knows of Chris's deck. If he knows what seeing this mana base in a teamer build early means, right, with otters. So I'm not exactly sure what information he's working with here, but it does look like he decided that it was safer to not tap out.
Yeah, these players have played a lot from being both local players and regulars here on the NRG series. And Chris is known for playing creature combo decks. So I think Raja can make a fair guess that there's going to be something that goes a little wild here from Chris, even if maybe Raja doesn't know, right? Like maybe Raja doesn't know the exact details of what's happening. He is going to be like, I know Chris doesn't just play otters for the sake of playing otters.
Well, yeah, and it would feel quite bad if you start your morning out just slamming down an Elspeth and not getting to one tap after that. It'd be quite a welcome to the tournament kind of moment there. So instead, Raja just opts to go with the Meringue River Regent Adventure side here. We're going to draw 3, discard. Hey, Raja's turns are fast, but we put our thinking time in on your instep here. Coil and Catch shuffles into the library, but that is plus a bunch of cards for Raja, who, again, just setting up, just hoping to have answer after answer, it would appear, to what is happening here. And in response, it looks like there was a Consult the Star Charts from Chris doing some setup of his own.
Yeah, I mean, telling that, Consult the Star Charts is on both decks. I know not every version of VV, ends up playing that card. The Prowess build of the deck does like having it. But I do think this is a card that, like, you're going to see a lot of over the next 3 years in Standard. It is very powerful. Good early, good late. And what more do you want? It looks like Raja did find the next land. Raja's been sort of, not having the land until exactly the start of the turn. So maybe this Meringue River region helps us.
It looks very seamless from Chris's side, but it's at least a little bit stressful from Raja's seat, given that you never want to miss a land drop essentially as the blue-white deck. And it's been a little bit of a struggle, but he's gotten there. And theoretically, after the Coil and Catch, he'll have he's got a grip of cards. You see him thumbing through all of that, deciding how he wants to progress the board here.
This is an interesting turn, too, because if Raja has something like another Meringue River Regent, playing it and bouncing both the creatures is actually a pretty reasonable play. Like, you could die to Vitality's, like, Storm Splitter stuff, but not really. You know what I mean? Like this is
Yeah.
kind of the turn where it's like you can maybe get away with it all if you're able to answer everything. But Raja deciding to play the Elspeth here and just answer the Storm Splitter. So now he's sort of got an empty board and this Elspeth that's going to take over. And this is a great spot for any control deck.
Yeah, this was, as they would say, this is where the corner turns, right? This is the corner turn of the match, right? The point where the Azorius control deck goes from setting up, filling my hand, making land drops, to, okay, well, now I'm trying to slam the door shut. And you do see Raja go ahead, opt to tap out here, uses a seam rip, gets rid of one of the small tokens, lands that Elspeth on an open board. So this is, in return, in the moment for Chris here, right? You actually have a chance to play whatever you want, but you don't have that much mana, and you don't have a way to pressure down Elspeth, it looks like. So looking like a pretty decent spot here for Raja. If he's able to obviously untap with that Planeswalker, you feel good about where you're at. So if you're Chris, you have to decide, well, if I can't deal with this immediately, then what's the best thing for me to do to try to answer this a turn cycle from now, or even 2 turn cycles from now? And as it turns out, it looks like all he's able to do here is play the Vitality, the Enduring Vitality, and pass the turn back with a couple mana open.
Yeah, and this is one of the interesting parts too, right? We need to have spells in hand for the Storm Splitter. So you can see Chris has a sleight of hand in hand and maybe even wants to cast it to, theoretically set up even more. But we kind of need to have something to get the ball going that's cheap, right? Like you need a 1 mana spell so you can get 2 mana worth of Storm Splitters in the next turn. So there's a little bit of awkwardness here where it's like, oh, I'd love to set up more and kind of guarantee, use my mana, yada, yada. But I just actually can't if I want to realistically win. We see an opt in hand as well. That one might get fired off at the end of turn, depending on what we have here.
Well, and because you have to do something, right? If you're Chris, this is just things are rolling for Raja because you've got tokens. You spot among his mana base there. I believe that is a Fountain Port, which can, of course, turn the tokens into additional cards should you need to. But, of course, any turn where you are the control deck and you just have a Fountain Port activation, if all else remains equal, that's good value for you, even if you don't have to cast a spell. So Chris knows he's got to go for it here. And so it looks like we are putting Storm Splitter on the stack.
Yep. And you're going to probably see Raja respond to this here. We have a 3 steps ahead in hand. And this is actually what Chris was not hoping for. Chris was really hoping Raja had to tap out again, even partially on his turn, so you can maybe set up a double spell situation. As now Raja is going to block the Enduring Vitality. He does have Vigilance, so he gets to prance across the battlefield. Oh, Haze of Pollen.
Or analyze the pollen, right? Yeah, so we're gonna go digging here. This is the this is a nice piece of tech, right? This card gets picked up in kind of just like odd deck lists. Sometimes you see it in places you don't necessarily expect, but what it does is it can go get a basic land card. However, if you collect evidence 8, which means exiling cards with mana value 8 or greater from your graveyard, you can get a creature or any land card to put it in your hand. So it can fix your mana early, but late game, and that's more or less, I guess, where we're at now, it turns into a tutor for basically anything you're going to want.
Yeah, and obviously on our Storm Splitter combo deck, Corbin, Chris made the educated guess that I would like to get a Storm Splitter as we have another one in hand now. And then the stock up as the follow-up. This is great. I mean, listen, Elspeth takes over the game pretty quickly, but not so quickly that, we don't have another chance to, fire off a couple spells in the next couple turns.
Yeah. I mean, I think I spot another 3 steps ahead there for Raja. So it is going to be an uphill struggle for Chris. But what is interesting in this match is that the resources being choked are not cards, it seems, right? This is very much a match that, at least thus far, has been about mana. And Raja has been able to spend quite a lot of it and quite effectively. And this is maybe one of the reasons we're not running out of cards, because here we go. It's another reload.
Yeah, I saw a Get Lost as one of the cards there for Raja. Sort of an awkward one. These Enduring Creature cycle, whenever they die, they come back as non-creature enchantments. Normally kill spell against the creature combo deck, that's premium. You're so happy. Here, though, one creature makes a copy of itself. The other one doesn't really die. Some awkward things to walk through here for Suleiman.
Looks like we're going to make the tokens that, of course, are a free chump block basically every turn. It's a Bitter Blossom that costs you no life.
Yeah.
But Raja is down to 9. So, you know, the little small hits over the course of the game have at least put him in a spot where if you're Chris, and you kind of assume that I'm probably going to have to pull something combo like to get there, but maybe you can see your way to 9 points of damage if you are able to get onto the board some more. But here we go. Storm Splitter has hit the stack. Raja deciding what to do here. 5 mana to work with. We're
Yeah, I
tap
think
3 of it to start.
I think this is actually it's a very subtle thing, Corbin.
Uh-huh.
But I think Raj is basically just considering like, do I use 3 steps ahead to also draw 2, discard 1, and tap
Right.
out? Because we all kind of know this get lost doesn't finish the job. Maybe it ends up doing something, but Raja wouldn't mind just looking through more cards to find another answer. Because I think the rest of our hand, besides the get lost, Corbin, is just threats. We've just end up drawing like a bunch of Bezas and Meringue River Regents.
Yeah, and while the Meringue River Regent can, in theory, also still scope your hand later, then we talk about the mana, and that does eat quite a bit of it to dig. So definitely a trade-off to be made.
Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe Roger's trying to set up something like use my Elspeth to kill your Vitality. Oh, another one coming down. I was gonna say he could have Elspeth the Vitality, get lost, the enchantment one,
Right.
and then suddenly there's no worries on that end. But the second Vitality is actually so brutal.
Yeah, so and in the end, Raja actually didn't even end up using that 2 mana, and it looked like I think it was a Plains off the top. Maybe not though. We'll see what he hit.
I think it was a Plains, yeah.
Yeah, so I was going to say, would have if you were to go for the draw discard there, would have found something that at least you'd consider having fodder to discard, but it threw me off. See, it's a different set.
Yeah. And now it's so interesting too, because Raja has this Elspeth. One thing we haven't talked about is, Elspeth's passive is making another token. Her effect doesn't actually make 2, it makes 1, and then she has the static ability of make another token the first time you would each turn. So that fountain port actually represents 2 fishes per activate, which means we could start blocking these vitalities. Once again, they'll still be around.
Oh, this is
Meringue
as
River
well.
Regent.
Okay, well, here we go. Opt-in response, but it looks like both of the enduring vitality. Yep, they're both going to get bounced to Chris's hand by the hardcast Meringue River Regent there for the full amount. Raja still has a fountain port activation open to sacrifice a token to draw another card, and we are at a point of the game where that matters. So here we go. There is now a very much growing amount of power in play for Raja, who has fully stabilized and completely wiped Chris's board of non-land. Well, I suppose we've got some talents over there, but more or less non-land permanents that matter right now. So this is just getting just small amounts of value early has just led to a deluge of value late. And Raja's looking very much in control of this if Chris can't find some way to a combo in basically the next 2 turns here.
Yeah, and Raja knows he can't really die easily by doing this play, right? Chris, like we were talking about before, choked on mana more than anything right now. So getting the first vitality down would eat most of Chris's mana for the following turns. And now Chris has snuck a vitality in, but he's trying to play around no more lies as well. So yeah, it looks like we're going to level up the Storm Chaser's talent to get back one of our instant sorcerers from the graveyard.
Yeah, okay. We're going to get back to the analyze. I mean, this is we're probably deep in the tank here. I think if you're Chris, when you get to activating the talents to return the analyze appall that you can't even cast yet, but that is the position he's in. So here we go. He passes the turn back, and now Raja knows I've got complete control of this one. How can I close this one out without opening myself up to some kind of small corner case where I lose, right? This is very much the point of the game where it's not about how can I win, it's about how can I lose if you're Raja, and that's what you want to play around as much as possible here. So that's what he's thinking about as he stares at a hand, and he doesn't love the hand. There's some get losts in there, another Elspeth, which doesn't do much. So maybe a little less action than he might want, right? So in terms of cards that are truly relevant here.
Yeah, I think Raja weirdly has a very clean kill over 2 turns. So Raja can attack this turn with the Meringue. Then we can do the minus play we talked about. I'm sorry, we can minus the Elspeth now, kill the Vitality, attack for 8, then get lost the vitality whenever a Storm Splitter gets put on the stack or whatever. Let Chris think he has that available to him. Let him commit his mana. And then you have another get lost ready for the other vitality or the Storm Splitter. It's going to be very awkward to actually do everything that Chris needs to do without getting another one of those in play. And then Raja has, 0 Elspeth play next Elspeth, 0 Elspeth attack for lethal.
Yeah.
So weirdly, Raja has, 5 mana mini overrun, but 5 mana mini overrun, as we learned from Limited, very good.
any overrun is a good overrun.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think you probably laid out exactly how this one's going to go. But the Azorius control deck, right? This is not mill you out Azorius control of yesteryear. This is not Nephalia Drown Yard win conditions and Esper. It's not Elixir of Immortality. This is make tokens, pump my tokens again, hit you for 9 again next game. Like this can end in a flash if you're Raja. And that's sort of a feature of the Azorius control decks in these formats ever since Elspeth kind of hit the equation.
Yep. And I really like the design too of cards like Moraine River Regent. They're a little pushed by like old standards, but the fact that you give them a draw spell that's also a win condition is just a really good way to make sure your Azorius control decks don't, spend 45 minutes winning game 1, right?
Yep.
Like even if they try to have no win conditions, they at least have the meringue.
You're like, yeah, this is not the days of my deck has one Pearl Lake Ancient in it.
Yeah,
that was a good one back in the day.
Bounce my dismal backwaters, protect my ancient, gain a life. Welcome to the abyss. All right, and it looks like Raja's gonna attack here. One thing when I mentioned before is I talked about how Raja might do the minus play or whatever. That is one way to go about winning it, but also you could make enough blockers that Chris might not be able to get enough of the attackers through because there's no Valley Flood Caller, right? So we're not getting all that extra power and mana off these storms. So there is a chance that things just don't end up working out here for Chris, even if he gets going. And so it looks like Raja, instead of trying to win the way I talked about, is trying to mitigate Chris being able to win and then still has access to that, Elspeth jump the team line on the next turn. As we are going to go searching up Storm Chaser. I guess the thing we hadn't thought about either is Raja, even though he can't ever really beat Storm Chasers due to like you'll always have priority before you can use one, he can't just get lost them twice and make it so that he has to kind of start from 1 to 2 multiple times, which maybe works.
Well, I mean, yeah, Chris is not exactly working with a ton of resources. So, and if you're Raja, you basically just need one more point of interaction, it feels like, right? You got to feel like you're almost there on this one. So, Analyze the Pollen, though, has been real good in this game for Chris, has it not? It's done exactly sort of for a kind of a one-off forgotten green card that we've not seen in a ton of decks necessarily up to this point. Looked pretty good here. If you're somebody who's wanting to get innovating on the standard format, brew it up. If you like the idea of trying to play creature combo in standard, looking at something like Storm Splitter, there are some pretty deep cards in the format you can look to. But here we go with the Rajas. Looks like we're going with the adventure side of another one here, just to dig for some more.
Yeah, I think what we've seen is Analyze the Pollen's a great way to fix your mana base a little bit too, while being a tutor enabler. So I wondered too if our VV deck's supposed to be looking like this, right? Like what is going on in that regard? So
that's right. We've seen this, right? We've seen the first iteration. Like we can play just this baseline. Is it Cauldron deck? This is great. But at some point, certainly when we go to the spotlight next week, people are going to be looking for ways to break that mirror. And it could very well involve a third color for something like that to increase consistency.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're seeing Raja. There's a sleight of hand on the stack. We catched and coiled. Didn't really get too far with that. I guess one of the things we didn't talk about too is without the Valley Flood Caller too, these Storm Splitters are kind of one and doneing until we eventually find a Flood Caller plus a way to untap, which is not impossible from the mana we're at right now, starting with Chris. So it looks like Raja is going to fire off He has 2 Get Lost in hand, so he can't answer the Vitality.
He knows that this is the decision point of this game, making sure that if I point this here, what could he have in response? And Raj's worked through that in his mind. And here we go. Get Lost has hit the stack. And it looks like it's just going to work. So here comes the Vitality returning back, of course, as an enchantment.
Yep. And then, the second Get Lost is going to pop down that Vitality. We did see Chris float a mana in response. So Chris is going to have 3 mana before the land drop for turn here on this last turn of the game. And without the Valley of Flood Caller too, Corbin, I don't know if we can protect this Vitality and actually, get far enough with the mana we have to realistically win. But Chris has got a Storm Splitter in play. We'll see what happens now. A sleight of hand resolves.
Okay, there's a Vitality.
All right, and this is the moment.
Okay. Torch away a token.
All right, so now we have 2 Storm Splitters because they are exponentially here.
Raj is at 9.
Yeah.
Another spell. Look at that. Look at what Chris has been able to put together here, though. How impressive is this?
Yeah, this is impressive. And this is what we're talking about, too, about, Roger could have tried to, attack the Otters in order to, prevent the exponential growth for a little bit. But all these 1-mana spells makes that such a hard task. And you're seeing Chris here using Analyze the Pollen. And now we're going to bounce these 2 things. We have gone infinite. And Roger Suleiman's defeated.
Wow.
Chris did a great job there, slowly setting up and then pulling the trigger when he needed to.
What a win that was. It looked like Raja was in control every step of the way. We talked about it. All he needs to do at this point is figure out how not to lose. And he recognized that as well. That's why he went digging for all the cards he could, because he knew that Chris could pull it off at any time. And that's what he did. So onto the sideboards we go. Raja Suleiman on Azorius control, now down a game, looks to that sideboard for some options. What do we want against the crazy creature combo deck that just took you down?
So Tashani's Tidebinder, a great way to stop some of these abilities and sort of turn off those creatures. That one I'm going to be pretty excited to slam. Flash Freeze and Standard thanks to Foundation. It's going to counter basically everything I think we saw that game. And then I think Rest in Peace is actually a pretty reasonable card to slot in here. We saw how good the Analyze the Pollen was, and you see part of the infinite of looping the Storm Chaser's talents are still in Standard. It's just a little bit more convoluted and not as flexible as when we had this town ain't big enough. So that does stop that part of the deck. I'm curious to see how Raja thinks he wants to fight this fight. Those Seam Rips in game 1 were good for answering the token part of Storm Chaser's talent, but you always leave something behind there. So maybe we'll see those go. We're going to have to see how Raja wants to play the game, but he does have a lot of different tools he can turn to try and close the door.
Yeah, certainly the counter spells and the Tidebinders seem just sort of blanket, pretty good place to be. And if you're right, if he decides to take out the Seam Rips so that everything in your deck is a more equitable answer, because you're not just doing it so you don't die to mice on turn 3 or whatever. So you might go in that direction. I mean, honestly, just taking a look there at Raj's deck, it's a pretty clean blue-white list. I'm not going to lie. I like the concept of where he's at with this as a deck for this format. So I'm not sure if this is necessarily the matchup he had in mind, but the sideboard options do look pretty good, I have to say.
Yeah, I doubt Roger was planning to play this deck too much this weekend. I have seen some players play this deck a little bit before Chris, but it's definitely not the most popular. One thing I want to note about Roger's deck is no Pinnacle Stargates. That is the temporary lockdown replacement we got from Edge of Eternities, and we have seen a lot of the other blue-white lists turning to that card. It has a very nice interaction with Seam Rip, where it doesn't actually get your Seam Rip, something that was awkward about temporary lockdown plus Portable Hole. But yeah, I mean, he has a Stasis Snare in his deck, not a Pinnacle Stargate. So Roger really saying, I don't want to rely on cards like that. Into the Floodmar are too much of a liability. Big innovation here from Raja Suleiman.
Well, and that was one of the big points of the last format, right? Is that whenever you played against the lockdown decks into the flood mall, the whatever $5, $6, $7 uncommon or whatever it is at this point, because of just how incredibly powerful it is across the format, because of just kind of, I guess, how brutally mana efficient it is. Yeah, it was a big part of those matchups before, and still is. So we'll see if we can take a look over at Chris's sideboard here and see what he wants when you play against the deck that just hopes to grind you into nothing. We see some Planeswalkers, some value, some counter magic of his own, the Heritage Reclamations. It's been a go-to card against the Cauldron decks and into the Flood Maw. Maybe be looking towards these Planeswalkers, though, as well.
Yeah, I imagine the Rows are going to come in, and then the Negates for sure. And then I bet you Chris probably, I don't know, it depends on how much Chris values a card like Pinnacle Stargate and Rest in Peace, but Into the Flood Maw is a good way to get one of those off the board for a turn and sort of combo. So I think it's not unreasonable that Chris does something like, I'm going to cut, all these Torch the Towers from my deck and then bring in, Rows and Negates. And then if I have some other card I'm not in love with, I'll try and bring in this Into the Flood Maw as an answer to, something that could get in my way later. Kind of depends on how Chris wants to play the games, but I think that makes a good amount of sense from the abstract.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, this deck, as long as you can get that early pressure like we saw in game one, which luckily one of your combo enablers in Stormwatcher Talent does provide a nice little Prowsy body, this deck can put you in that squeeze spot we saw in game one where Raja has to do something. And that first turn tapping out for Elspeth wasn't even the worst case possible for Raja,
right?
But it did sort of give Chris that time to restock and refill up. Where if Raja was at 16, 17 life, I bet we would have seen him very slowly make land drops and get to the point of Elspeth plus 3 steps ahead. So we need to have a good mixture of pressure in the early game so we can set up for our combo in the late game.
That's a great way to put it too, because it's easy to look back at that game and sort of the micro of how this turn went and how that turn went. But you're absolutely right to talk about the sort of the macro of the way just Raja chose to approach it, and from the turn 3 on. Very good point to look at. Not just what could I have done differently on all of these turns, but could I have just approached things differently, I think is something that can help people really level up, especially when you start talking about decks like, say, Azorius Control that, give a layperson an Azorius Control deck and give Shoda control deck, right? It's just I'll give Nassif a control deck. There's a totally different experience, and there's a lot of levels there that can happen on sort of a high level, as you mentioned there. So often running in this one, and by running I mean we're really just kind of I'd say walking, shambling, maybe. We're not doing much.
Yeah, and you see here Raja flash freezes the Enduring Vitality and no pressure early. Raja has a hand full of card. Yeah, and he actually is just going to slam the door on this game here and slam Elspeth down immediately because he has only one counter left and he has no more lands. Raja's been ripping lands off the top. We have a Beza, and now we're going to spend the rest of this game just attacking. Yeah, and I love this from Chris.
There will be no attacks in this game.
I love this because, listen, Chris could keep playing, and he probably has 2 or 3 turns. But if Raja has any counter spell, and just he's played against the deck now too, so he knows what's happening. As long as he counters anything that's reasonable, Chris can't win in time because Elspeth wins so fast.
Yeah, like Elspeth wins so fast that you're probably going to lose the game, but also just slow enough that you might as well just scoop and save the time on your clock because you are, after all, going to a game 3 against Blue-White in round 1 of the NRG standard 10K showdown here in Lansing. You don't want it to pick up that draw in round 1.
Definitely. And since we just saw those players' sideboards a second ago, it would be great to see the upcoming events here for the NRG series. We can talk about where we're going here for the rest of the years. We're going to pull it up really quick here. So right now we're in August in Lansing, Michigan. We have 2 more events left. I misspoke earlier and said 3. That's on me. September 13th to the 14th, we're going to be in Mundelein, Illinois. 10K Modern Showdown on Saturday. Now, this slide's a little outdated, but we have the updated one coming to you. Sorry about that here. On Sunday, we're going to be having a Legacy 2.5K and a Seal 2.5K for Edge of Eternity. So when it comes to coverage, we're going to stream you all the Legacy action. We know you love the Legacy, so make sure to follow along wherever you're watching this. Just tune in for that. That's going to be in just a few short weeks from now, September 13th to the 14th. We'd love to see you all, especially you Legacy heads. We know you love to play Paper Legacy. We'd love to see your crazy innovations. Show us the tech that isn't on there. I want to see a little Deadpool action. Okay, I see it tearing up CDH. I want to know what it can do in Legacy. Remember, first and the second, though, we're going to be in Elmhurst, Illinois to wrap up the year. We have a 10K Team Showdown Standard Sealed Modern. We're going to be streaming that as well, and a 10K Modern Showdown on Sunday. Lots of Modern, wrapping up the year for that leaderboard. And then you'll notice here, today we're doing the Standard Showdown, but tomorrow, Corbin, we have a Team 10K Trial, Standard Modern Popper. Listen, we've had a lot of Popper side events at our events. Y'all have been coming out in droves. You've been telling us we love Popper. We love Popper. This is our chance. We're going to be streaming that tomorrow. So if you're a big Popper head or you know some friends who are into that, let them know we're going to be in tomorrow. And we'd love to see that support come out here as these players are going out fast here with a Christmas surveilling turn 1 and leaving on top. Corbin, I'm going to ask you, is that a good surveil or a bad surveil?
That's a good surveil.
But you lost the value. Think about it, as we are going to see it during.
You could have had it. It could have been a gain life land. So you are down in that exchange of what your tap land could have been. It's true.
Yeah. And your Analyze the Pollen, it could be +3 mana to the Collect Evidence. You know, it's a tough card. It's a tough card.
Yeah,
you know,
fair. This worked out a lot differently than that second game did in these first turbo fast 3 turns. Because in this one, Chris has resolved the Enduring Vitality, which is we talked about is one of the most important pieces in the matchup. We saw it tax Raja for 2 pieces of removal in game 1, and he still lost. That's how important it is. And I would have to get a look at Raja's hand here, but it resolves. The Storm Chaser's talent resolves. You're maybe a little confused if you're Chris. I think you probably expected something to happen to your cards when you cast them. So you got to be trying to figure out what does that mean Raja actually is working with over there.
Yeah, so there's 2 things going on here. Raja played a bunch of tap plans turn 1, so this, no more lies. This is the first time it's actually been able to even be a read. And yeah, I think Chris could have easily have been on the assumption that, okay, there's 3 steps ahead type cards in hand for Raja, and he has no interaction. He's trying to think, okay, I see this 3 steps ahead. That's probably what Raja was thinking about. And now Chris is thinking, okay, Raja might be missing lands. And I think Raja Suleiman kept a 2-lander, Corbin, and drew that plains on turn 3. And now is looking at his hand as he draw 2, discards 1, and sees no lands, and is trying to figure out how am I going to win the game from here.
Yeah, and it involves ripping a land off the top right here. Do not think he did. Back up against the wall then early for Raja. If you're oh no, it was okay. We do have a demolition field. I also spotted a Day of Judgment, I think, in his hand. Yes. So that represents sort of a plan if Chris does get a couple more bodies in play. But okay, this is a way different game because we do have that 4th land. So it's been living on the edge of your seat here for the control buffs out there of stressing over those land drops. A little bit still of an awkward hand, I think, for Raja, but you are in the game here.
Yeah, Raja has his Stasis Snare in hand, which is his Flash Oblivion Ring, exile a creature. And I think Raja is basically thinking about, do I need to no moralize this Questing Druid, or do I need to get this Vitality off the board? Also, would Chris's deck play Spell Pierce? Because if I play the Stasis Snare and Chris goes Spell Pierce with the Vitality mana, it's over for Raja. Like, it isn't actually over, but the tempo is insane. As Ral Crackling Wit gets slammed here. And we're floating a mana, I think. I don't think we needed to spend 5 mana on that card.
We'll get that one pulled up there, as you can see it. Seems to be the Ral Crackling Wit. I'm not going to read the entire card, but as you see it on your screen there, it's a recurring source of value, which makes it a go-to sideboard card in a lot of these grindy matchups because once you get it into play, just making orders every turn is going to win the game before too long. And then, of course, it does things besides that with its minus ability as well. So this one does hit the battlefield, and it does immediately plus and make those orders. Now, we know that Raja probably has a Day of Judgment, but if Ral's in play, after that, Chris can just reload. So we'll see what Raja wants to do here to try to work his way through this. And even if his colors of mana might be a little awkward based on how it develops. So he's thinking about what he wants to do here on the end step. Lots to consider because this game could get out of control it could slip away very easily.
So what's happening, Corbin, is we named blue with our Sunken Citadel because at the time we had, I think, maybe the planes rolled up or whatever, or potentially we were playing around knowing we have more planes in our deck. And so now we can activate the demolition field. We can try and take Chris off a color of mana. But if we do that, we're removing a land from our deck, and Raja's trying to rip lands off the top. So he's in an awkward spot here. We do have Get Lost, which can answer this Row Crackling Wit, as Stasis Snare is going to come down.
Well, and he did find that land off the top, I believe, there.
Yeah.
So here we go. Stasis Snare is going to take out the Vitality, and Get Lost is going to go with the Planeswalker. Okay. This makes some sense, right? Because now the recurring, you've exiled the Enduring Vitality. The tokens are still here, but your life total might actually be like 19 or something instead of 20 or whatever. But the point is your life total is still at least fairly safe. You can take a hit and just wipe the board later if you need to. Definitely. If it was a Day of Judgment hand, which I do think it is. All right.
It is definitely a Day of Judgment, yeah. As we are going to see Analyze the Pollen used for its land mode here and plus the team. One of the things I'm curious about too is, we saw Heritage Reclamation in the sideboard for Chris. That's a card that we sometimes see come in from players as a way to answer, miscellaneous, permanents that the Azorius control deck does play. I wonder how many Chris has. And if he has one, this could be really punishing, as that Vitality now is sort of hiding away until the moment's right. So I'm curious to see, how Chris sideboarded. We talked about maybe having a card like Into the Flood Maw that would sort of answer the Stasis Snare, kind of taxes 3 mana. That can be hard for Raja as Stock Up gets played.
Well, and the other thing here too, that's just kind of true for the rest of the game, is that if you do find if you are playing those cards and if you do find them, you have the ability to unlock that Bounding Vitality or Enduring Vitality at instant speed at any time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in some ways, right, it's sitting in its own little command zone of unwrathable status where you can just pull it out if you do find a Heritage Reclamation, etc., when you get to that point of the game. So that's kind of an interesting little sub game that gets unlocked when you do have an enchantment like Stasis Snare eating an important piece. But we're not playing sub games anymore. We're playing just the big game, and that's Elspeth slamming down, making tokens for Raja, tapping out, and Chris trying to see how do we respond.
Chris thinks Ral is 5 mana. I thought maybe I missaw the mana usage earlier, but Chris is for the second time tapped 5 lands for Ral. My friend, that card is very strong. It is 4 mana. And this sometimes happens. Listen, I played for a long time thinking Landed Arbiter, you just spend 2 mana every time you searched. And I was out there playing Titan Shift, spending the 2 extra every time. So, listen, we all make mistakes. It happens here. But this Ral's going to come down. It does pump the Otters due to prowess. And then we're going to make another Otter. And Chris is, if we know there's a Get Lost in hand here for Raja to answer this Ral. But from Chris's perspective, if he can untap with this Ral in the next turn, he's actually in a really powerful position. And now Raja's deciding, do I even want to block? Because we could just buff up these tokens too in the next turn, and then they're going to be winning.
I think this is such an interesting spot for sure. It does look like so he's probably going to block and then Wrath and then make more tokens, right? That's sort of the baseline you would think that we would see. But Raja is, I guess, thinking through, is there anything else I can do with it? Maybe I can get kind of frisky in combat here instead, getting a little aggressive. But no, it looks like we do just go for the double chump block. Untap into you have options here. We found another land. These lands have just been Raja's living a blessed life today.
Yeah. I see why Raja keeps so many 2-landers, because Raja just draws lands every turn. He's like the people that are like, all I ever do is flood out, but he's taking it to the logical extreme and he keeps every hand.
Right. Yeah. If I'm only gonna draw lands.
Yeah.
Well, it worked out. It's just worked out. Well, I guess at this particular turn, he even had 1 extra mana. Didn't even need it. But did have exactly what he did need, and that is that Day of Judgment, wipe the tokens, Get Lost. Well, that Planeswalker is lost now. It is gone. It is lost to Chris. But so shields down though for Raja, and here we go. Storm Splitter.
Okay, so now these tokens only last until end of turn. That's something we didn't talk about before,
right? Because
normally when we're Storm Splittering, it's like do or die. Here, though, we're kind of setting up, getting it in play, and we are going to be able to attack the Elspeth / Raja.
Yeah.
So Raja, as long as he doesn't die this turn, we'll only have to deal with one of the otters, and we have a bunch of ability to do that in our deck. So we're gonna have to see exactly what happens here. But time is another factor too, as I think these players have about 6 or 7 minutes on the clock. I wonder if that was maybe playing a factor into Raja thinking about into like letting the otters hit, and then having an attack force back, as Elspeth's getting attacked for 4, has plenty of loyalty to spare.
And Raja's actually down on cards, I believe, to Chris at this point too. Might also have been playing into those decisions. Now that's where we got to shout out Chris for just smart tournament play to scoop that second game, so that you get into this spot here and actually have an opportunity to finish your game in a relevant manner. But there we go. Okay, Elspeth knocked down to 4. Storm Splitter copies gone. Raja untapping, picking up a second card for the turn, staring down the combo red card, but not much else from Chris's side here. So, stock up is huge.
It's huge, and the card before Resolve Stock Up is Consult the Star Charts. So even if we just use the 2 mana mode, we're going to see 7 cards. Assuming we don't find a land here, we can find a lot of different answers from there, including, something like a Get Lost here. So Raj is going to minus his Elspeth. Yeah, we saw that's why he chump blocked. He wanted to answer the Storm Splitter, and then he's going to leave back the chump blocker to protect his Elspeth. We do have this Fountain Port activation as well that makes 2 fish. Thanks to Elspeth. Raja is just in such a great spot. And I mean, listen, we used the stock up there. We could easily also consulted the star charts and probably been in a very similar spot. This deck having 7 to 8, depending on how you want to build it, sort of refuel cards in the late game here. This is something that always is a struggle for these Zoras control decks. I'd love to play that many, but how do I do it and not, just be totally awkward in the early game? These things are normally 4-ish mana, 5-ish mana, not anymore.
Well, if you stock up, I stock up. Chris does the same thing. So now they're certainly glad that they have at least a little bit of time on the clock. He almost pulled the trigger on an Analyze the Pollen, did Chris, it looked like. It's got to be tempting with that Elspeth sitting at 1 loyalty to go get the Storm Splitter with your Analyze the Pollen and just try to poke it to death and hope that Raja is sitting on, I'll just make some fish on the other side. And maybe that is still where things eventually end up here. But Chris opting instead to start off with the stock up.
Yeah, and you need something like stock up if you're going to get yourself out of this position. It's not totally lost here. This Elspeth's at 1. But it is a really tough spot here, especially since we can assume Chris did cut all the Torture Towers, right? Maybe we left 1 in our deck for situations like this, right? Like, okay, we're going to see a lot of Elspeth minus on my key combo pieces. Maybe I'll leave 1 Torch the Tower. But I doubt we have more than that in our deck, which means Chris is drawing to very few outs.
We saw him get there on very few outs in game 1, and that's got to be what he's hoping he can do again here. We're going to tap out for an Enduring Vitality. Decides just going to run it out there, and if this works, I'm in a good spot, and it did work. It resolved, and here is a kicked Consult the Star Charts for Raja.
Yeah, and I mean, 7 cards. Listen, if you ever played against Memory Deluge in the past, you know just how powerful this part of the game can be. Now, you didn't get your first shot of Memory Deluge before this happened, but still, 4 mana look at 7 in spots like this is just so powerful for these control decks. They just get to pick apart what the opponent's doing. And Raja here gets to be like, okay, I've got this, Elspeth. It's probably going to do a pretty good job of living. Okay, what do I need to do to answer this card? I'll do that. Maybe I'll play this Meringue River Regent, bounce a card, put Chris in an awkward spot. But time has got to be getting a factor here. Now, our future match players do have a little bit of an extension just because their match starts a little later. They don't actually get more time. They just are on a slightly different round clock. So for them, they are probably closing in on that final 5. So plenty of time to finish the game naturally. But
yes, Raja certainly went into the tank a bit on that one. So you'd think if they were a little more pressed, he'd go a little faster. But it does look like, though, you mentioned he's in a good spot. I think I see some cards in his hand there that No More Lies is being a key one.
Oh, and Tidebinder too.
Yeah, looking fairly unlosable if in the sense of like on this turn, if you're Raja. So, and you've got your tokens going. So you've turned the corner in terms of stabilizing the board, and you've got to feel good about the long term here. But that is also where we sat in game one, and where we saw the same thing. We saw Chris use stock ups in game one to set up a plan to win several turns from then. And that may be what we're seeing here as well, because he went for that enduring vitality last turn. It did actually stick, and here he is untapping with it. So you know you're probably against it here if you're Chris, but all hope is not lost, and we'll see what he opts to ultimately start with here as he goes for this big combo turn.
Speaking of sitting, like you were saying,
Yeah.
look at the body language. Chris is sort of slumped over.
Yeah, that's a good
what am I going to
point.
do? Raja is set up, ready to go. I think both players kind of know what we know, which is, Chris is in a tough position, not an unlosable position. We saw Chris being willing to scoop it up in game number 2, which, by the way, looks so good now, right? For Chris, gives him that a little bit of extra time to think through what he wants to do here. Raja has a No More Lies in hand, which doesn't counter the Storm Splitter because there's 3 mana, but does tap Chris out with the ability to maybe kill that Storm Splitter.
And it also, by doing that, right, just by making Chris tap out, you unlock a lot of your own mana for the end step.
Yeah. I really like this idea from Raja here. Just tap Chris down. That card's not going to get much better if your opponent has, Storm Splitter or Vitality.
Yeah, this is a great use of 2 mana. Because Raja's going to have Fountain Port if he wants it, assuming even if we could have Consult the Star Chart in hands, perhaps. I think it's maybe a stock up, but anything Raja does with his mana is a bonus here, because theoretically you think once you untap, I should be able to answer the board. But all right, here we go. Storm Splitter tapping for mana.
And here comes Shani's Tidebinder to clean up that triggered ability.
Right. So no token is made from Storm Splitter. The combo stopped in its tracks, and for good measure, your Storm Splitter has no more abilities as long as this Tishana's Tidebinder in play, which is a merfolk, I might add.
It is. And now we're going back to that thing I talked about before. Chris probably brought in that into the Flood Maw to answer various cards. Did we leave in the 1 torch? Because currently, Storm Splitter is just off now. And Chris's deck doesn't play a lot of ways to remove a Shini's Tidebinder in general in the deck. And like we said before, he probably cut them. And this is why thinking about what your opponent might sideboard for you is so important. Chris maybe did think about this and has torches in the deck. Only Chris knows right now. But those kind of decisions are huge. If you know your opponent has a card like Tidebinder, you might have to bite the bullet on keeping in 1 torch to the tower when your deck's all in on a creature with an ability like this. Time has been called to Corbin, as Raja is now, I believe, our turn 0.
Yeah, that makes it a little bit interesting if Raja's turn 0, not to get too deep into the math, but you have 5 power in play. You can do some Elspeth pumps. Like 20 is still kind of a lot from this position to have to deal if you're Raja over 3 turns if he is in fact turn 0. So an interesting wrinkle for sure if that is the point of the game we're at. And we've talked about it this whole round, at least the back half of this round, for a reason. And it's because this is a common late game situation for a blue-white deck to find itself in. And that's why if you do play these decks, you mentioned earlier, they can take so little time on their own turns. That's out of necessity often.
Mm-hmm. So Raja has a weird lethal here. So it's not the cleanest lethal, but sometimes you do have to take risks in a spot like this.
Yeah.
We can 0, buff our team. Everyone gets flying. Everyone gets a counter. We attack. That attack is for 8. Chris is down to 12. Yep. Then on the next turn, we can animate our land and do a similar thing. And then, work from there. Problem is, Chris has 2 creatures.
Right.
One of them will kill the Elspeth. So we can use Fountain Port to create 2 blocking fish. And we can just throw one into the bus and have the other one for some, other Storm Splitter type card and you have the Tidebinder up. Those are all very reasonable-ish plays. The other option is you can, Meringue River Regent and bounce some stuff. But if you do that, well, the Storm Splitter might be back on live. So
yeah, he might just. Maybe you just play it to bounce the vitality, just attacks Chris the most while also putting power into play for yourself, so that maybe you can. I don't know if that would actually get you to lethal next turn, but it's possible it could. depending on how the rest of it goes. So a lot to consider, but you also don't want to just kind of mess around and accidentally end up in a spot where you lose yourself the game too. The benefit of time being called is, in fact, if Raja is turn 0 right here, you're no longer on a clock. You've got time to think it through.
Yeah, and it looks like Raja's going to lead with a Get Lost. So you could Get Lost the Vitality here, and that actually does remove a mana from Chris and the one creature that can attack your Elspeth.
Right.
And Chris already has 3. Oh, and we're going to Tashani's Tidebinder, so the Vitality is off the board.
Okay, it doesn't come back, so that way it means that Chris cannot just play a second Storm Splitter and try to start comboing. You have to find another Vitality if you're Chris, which means your mana is getting taxed even more.
Yeah, I actually think. Well, yeah, but now Chris can win, though, right? If Chris goes Vitality Splitter,
yes,
that Vitality will still have mana abilities. It doesn't lose that because the Vitality is giving it. Roger theoretically could lose the game from here.
Yeah, Raja did this to maximize damage, right? Because by putting that Tidebinder into play on your main phase before you activate Elspeth, you're able to get that counter on it while also having it up as a blocker to protect Elspeth should that become relevant. So this is like what we talked about, an aggressive line that I guess technically opens you up to maybe something going badly here. But it certainly, on the other hand, ends the game as fast as possible. So with time being called, that's the line Raja opts for. And Chris is going to opt as well.
Okay, I think this first opt means Chris can't Vitality Storm Splitter this turn.
Probably needed to start with a Vitality there. Yeah.
Yeah. Because the Vitality will not tap for mana on the first turn because it personally doesn't have haste. It does let this sort of turned off splitter do it.
Right. Say it gives that a mana ability, can turn it into a mana dork, and there is the land for Chris. So access to in total 6 mana right now, but up to 7 if there's a Vitality. Okay, so there's a handshake.
Yeah, and that will do it. And actually, I forgot that Chris hadn't played land for turn. He did have an out there. You go Vitality, you go Storm Splitter. That's lethal. So that, I mean, assuming we have enough spells to chain off. So wow, crazy stuff there from Chris Smith's Otter combo deck. Congratulations to Roger Suleiman for winning that round. Dangerously close. And we saw how Roger kind of, in multiple spots kind of had to just hope things didn't go too poorly. Sign of a great control player. Also the sign that maybe Chris's deck's a little fire, especially if things end up changing with standard as time goes on.
Well, hey, these teamer decks, right? If I covered the Arena Championship last weekend, and the Battle Crier deck really took some people by surprise out of nowhere too. So we hope to bring you some more of that spice today. We're playing the Showdown in Lansing. That was a great way to kick things off on this 10K tournament today.
Yep. Well, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back with more Magic as that was time in the round. So we'll see you in just a couple minutes.